All right, so I am obviously not Jeff Lindeen. My name is Adrian Brovero. I'm the debate coach at the University of Mary Washington, which is a public school in Virginia. And I'm going to speak with you folks about politics dissent this morning. How many of you have run a politics dissent? How many of you debate the politics dissent relatively frequently? How many of you debate it more frequently than you'd like? All right. How many of you think we should have been involved in the NATO airstrikes in Libya? Really? Just one? Two, maybe? Okay. How many of you think we should be acting more aggressively to prevent the Syrian government from killing its own people? Okay. How many of you think we should get out of Guantanamo Bay? Okay. How many of you think we never should have been there in the first place? Okay. All right, so we have some opinions. Let's see how informed you are. Who knows when the next presidential election is? Maybe a year, even?
Will be like voting days down in like 2015, and they are inaugurated in 2016. No?
It's every 4 years.
Oh, that was completely wrong.
We just had one in
What was I
2012.
thinking?
Math, anyone?
It's 2016.
Correct, 2016, November 8th, 2016. Does anybody know what day of the week election day is?
Thursday.
Tuesday.
I hear some Tuesdays. Tuesday is accurate. Okay. The presidential election is always held on a Tuesday, never on a Thursday. If you show up on Thursday to vote, you're going to be out of luck. How many of you know who your senators are from your state?
Florida?
Okay. Anybody know who their representative is from their district? Okay, a few of you. How many of you intend to register to vote and actually vote at the first opportunity to do so? All right, between now and then, please learn who your senators are and who your representatives are. You have a little bit of time between now and 2016 to figure out those things. All right, big letter A, the top 10 reasons to run the politics disadvantage. Or also known as the top 10 reasons you'll debate it whether or not you want to. Number 10, links to everything. Okay, all policies have political implications. Okay, inevitably in doing our reading, we will find reasons why the policies have a political impact. Number 9, it's generic throughout the years. Okay, not just election years. Okay, although it needs to be updated, the basic thesis of the disadvantage and the skills required to run it are ultimately very similar across the forms. Did most of you debate an elections dissent last fall?
Yeah.
Okay. Is it that different from debating a presidential agenda dissent? No, not really. And there are also international politics dissents. Okay, we already, for instance, at this camp have a politics dissent based on the Mexican domestic political situation. And I imagine that there will be others throughout the year. Okay, another politics dissent is potentially a congressional elections dissent. Okay, all of the House and a third of the Senate will face elections in the fall of 2014. Okay, so the next presidential election is in 2016. The next midterm election is November 4th, 2014. Most of the time, you will probably even this fall start hearing midterm elections dissents. Number 8, it is easy to research. Okay, so back when I debated, we didn't have the internet. Okay, the internet was like a new thing toward the end of my debate career. So we had to go cut newspapers every day to get all of the politics cards that we wanted, which was extremely tedious, and you wound up with lots of newsprint on your fingers and stuff like that. You folks don't have to do that. Okay, obviously with the internet, you have thousands of news organizations, political parties, politicians, government institutions, think tanks, special interests, political action groups, academic journals. All these websites are at your disposal in order to create and update the disadvantage quickly. How many of you have used Google News' updates or Google News alerts? Fantastic. You can now, as a result of those, get politics updates sent to your inbox. I have probably over 100 different Google alerts set up. I have them filtered through my email so they don't just sit in the inbox. I have probably, a good number set up. And that way you can get every article about political capital as it happens, or once a day, have all those things sent to your inbox. So when someone reads a version of the disadvantage that you haven't heard before, or an impact you haven't heard before, it is relatively easy if you set up news alerts to start looking for things in your inbox or in your Gmail to find the stuff that you may already have. For instance, I have law of the sea treaty, I have immigration reform, I have a whole bunch of different impacts set up so that when someone reads them, I can just search my email. Number 7, it is a net benefit to several counterplans. Okay, most of you on this past topic probably debated it as a net benefit to the state's counterplan. It can also be a net benefit to the executive order counterplan, the court's counterplan, international actor counterplans, privatization counterplan, and many other counterplans that you'll hear throughout the year. Number 6, the dissent has a quick time frame. The link to this dissent is immediate. Okay, the initiation of the plan is enough to generate the link. It is not too hard to find short-term, quick agenda scenarios. Okay, the time frame for the impact is also usually much shorter than the time frame for the affirmative solvency for their case impact. Okay, it is oftentimes the case that perceptions of whether or not an agenda item passes or fails can immediately trigger the sequence of events necessary for the impact. For example, the unpopular plan prevents passage of the debt ceiling hike. Failure to raise the debt ceiling would be an immediate blow to our economic soft power. International perceptions and global markets will be immediately impacted, causing the global economy to stagnate or even shrink. Number 5, it outweighs the affirmatives case. Depending on the impact scenario, the risk of the politics dissent may outweigh many of the advantages of small affirmatives on the topic, especially the tiny affirmatives you may not have much to say against. For example, an affirmative advantage may claim oil spills as an advantage to their Cuba app. Some would consider that a pretty low magnitude impact when compared to the collapse of the US economy and the global mayhem that would ensue if the US were to default on its debt. So a politics impact scenario with a bigger impact or a higher probability of occurring might outweigh the risk of the affirmative's impact. Number 4, it could short-circuit the affirmative solvency. It could short-circuit the affirmative solvency. Unpopular or controversial plans are not likely to solve if the advantage hinges on using a lot of U.S. resources or depends on improving U.S. global leadership. For example, a case that commits a massive investment in resources to bolster Venezuela's oil infrastructure, if there is a backlash against the massive spending of the plan, it would make it harder for those resources to be allocated and spent effectively if there are massive fights that force proponents to overcome the various hurdles in defending the plan. Another example, a case that claims to reform immigration in order to include more low-skilled workers who may be a traditionally marginalized group. Solving that advantage, changing people's attitudes about that marginalized group, would require a degree of attitude change. However, if proposing the plan triggers a wave of xenophobia against immigrants, then it is less likely to be able to solve for that advantage. There's also, finally, the potential for rollback. If a plan hurts Obama, it may undermine support for other engagement policies, triggering their rollback and undercutting the solvency of the plan. Number 3, it can turn the affirmative's case. Okay, if the disadvantage impact scenario involves an economy or war impact, for instance, it could potentially make the risk of the harms higher. Okay, an economic collapse may make Latin American instability more likely. Number 2, real world. We do policy debate, and politics is part of policy making. We can't help but find ourselves reading about the political implications of policies in the literature. Okay, economic engagement is kind of a hot issue in terms of whether or not people think we should be spending resources abroad in the current economic climate. Which leads us to number 1, it's the economy, stupid. Over 20 years ago, during the '92 election, the Clinton war room, the campaign team, had a big poster up on the wall that said, "It's the economy, stupid." That was to remind them that that was the pressing issue at the time, and that if they could tie things back to the economy and how they would help the economy, it would improve their odds of election. Well, we're at a similar point in time where the global economic situation has put the economy at the foreground once again. Okay? The economy gets tons of coverage in the media, the debt ceiling debate, the anti-tax Tea Party people, bailouts, unemployment, factory closings, farm closings, all these things are high profile. decisions Obama makes about economic engagement with other countries will impact these issues and have political implications. Every policy gets viewed through an economic lens. Politicians want to know how much it's going to cost us and how much will we get back in return. They look at legislative proposals and they ask themselves, what's in it for me in relation to the voters or constituencies that I'm trying to appeal to? Which means, as each aft plan comes along, politicians at every level will be asking, what's in it for me? All right, big letter B, the civics. Number one, political leaders. All right, we're going to see what else we know here. Okay, so who can tell me the names and parties of the following people? The president? Obama. He is a... Does anybody know where he's from?
Hawaii.
Hawaii.
Illinois.
Kenya, Indonesia. He officially comes from Illinois. That was where he was elected to the Senate and had lived most of his later portion of his life. Who's the vice president?
Biden.
Joe Biden. His party?
Democrat.
Does anybody know where Biden's from?
Scranton, Pennsylvania.
That's where he lived for a long period of time, and might have been where he was born. But he's actually from Delaware. Okay, he was the senator from Delaware. Who knows who the Speaker of the House is? John Boehner, B-O-E-H-N-E-R, not Boner. Okay. What party?
Republican.
Republican. Does anybody know where he's from? Ohio. Okay, the Senate Majority Leader. Harry Reid, very good. Harry Reid, it's R-E-I-D, not R-E-E-D. Democrat, where's he from? Nevada. All right, House Minority Leader. Nancy Pelosi, where's she from? California. Senate Minority Leader. Who? No. Mitch McConnell. He's a Republican from Kentucky. Eric Cantor's sort of the second person in the House under Boehner, and he's from Virginia. But relevant, useful information to know. Does anybody know who the president of the Senate is? Vice president is the president of the Senate, which means that in the event of a tie in the Senate, if there's a 50-50 split, he casts the tiebreaker. All right, number two, what parties are currently represented in the federal government? Democrats and Republicans. Anybody else? Okay, there are two independents. Okay, there are two independents in the Senate. Does anybody know who they are? Yes, Bernie Sanders from Vermont, who interestingly, he was in the House prior to being in the Senate. When he was in the House, he considered himself a socialist. Okay. When he decided to run for the Senate, he thought maybe he should have a little bit broader appeal, so he decided to be an independent as opposed to a socialist. Does anybody know who the second independent in the Senate is? Angus King of Maine. Okay. And so he is also one of the independents in the Senate. All right, number three, the Senate. Who can tell me which party currently controls the majority in the Senate? The Democrats. Democrats. How many votes do they have? Low 50s. Okay, there are currently 52 Democrats in the Senate. Does anybody know how many Republicans there are in the Senate?
No,
Okay, we just said there were
47.
2 independents. Math, folks.
46.
52 Democrats, 46 Republicans,
Oh,
and 2 independents, but the 2 independents typically vote with the Democrats, okay, for the functional purposes of giving them the majority, and they had the majority anyway, but if it were closer, the 2 independents voting with them would make them, would count toward them. So the Democrats typically have 54 votes, which is 6 shy of what?
Majority.
Not 2/3.
60%.
It is 6 votes short of the 60 votes that are necessary to end a filibuster. Okay, you need to have 3/5 of the Senate vote for cloture, C-L-O-T-U-R-E, which is how you end a filibuster. We'll talk a little bit more about the significance of that later. There will be one special election held in October for the New Jersey Senate seat. Does anybody know why? Okay, New Jersey's longtime Senator Frank Lautenberg passed away at the beginning of June. He was a Democrat. The Republican governor of New Jersey, does anybody know who that guy is? Chris Christie. We saw a lot of him back in the fall. Chris Christie appointed a Republican to replace him. That Republican's name is Jeffrey Chiesa. He will only be in the seat until October when they hold a special election in order to determine who replaces him. So in the fall, it will be interesting to see whether or not the Democrats gain back one more seat or not. All right, number 4, the House. Does anybody know how many seats there are in the House of Representatives? 400 something? 435 to be precise. To get a majority, how many votes do you need?
A lot.
2 a lot, is that what you said? 218, okay, which is one more than half. So the GOP has 234 members, so they control the House as well. They control the House. The Democrats have 201 members. That does add up to 435. There are not any vacancies. Well, this could have changed in the last few days. There will be 2 vacancies soon, if not already. Democratic Representative Ed Markey from Massachusetts will be resigning because he just won Kerry's Senate seat for Massachusetts in a special election just last week. And then a Republican, Joe Bonner from Alabama, is going to resign in August to take a job at the University of Alabama. So there will have to be special elections held for those 2 seats, but they have yet to be scheduled. Occasionally, special elections can influence politics dissents. Probably not so much the case with Massachusetts or New Jersey or Alabama, but if there were to be a special election in Florida, okay, Florida has a special relationship with Cuba, okay, so a Cuba act could influence the outcome or could have an effect in relation to a special election if one were to happen in Florida. But this year I imagine the special elections will probably be not particularly relevant, except to the extent that it may change the numbers of Democrats or Republicans. All right, so we've covered the civics and why you should be informed from a voter perspective. Now we'll talk about being informed about the politics dissent from a debate perspective. Big letter C, Obama good. We're going to talk about the 2 primary versions of the dissent, Obama good and Obama bad. But for the most part, the same things, you can substitute in a different president if you're debating that long. You can substitute in the parties and their agenda. These are basically the templates and formulas to follow for the 2 main forms of the dissent. So number 1, the generic shell. A, Obama can pass X agenda item now. X will vary from round to round. Okay, some rounds it might be comprehensive immigration reform, another round it might be the law of the sea treaty, another round it might be trade promotion authority. B, the plan makes him unpopular with someone. Okay, like I said, this is the basic template for the dissent. Almost every politics dissent that is an Obama good dissent will say that the plan makes him unpopular with someone. C, popularity or political capital are key to the agenda. And we'll talk a little bit more about what those mean in a few minutes. And then D, X agenda item is good. Okay, that's where the dissent gets its name. Obama good assumes that his agenda is good. Have any of you ever had the circumstance where it was unclear after the 1 in C whether they were saying Obama's agenda or Obama's election was good or bad? You've heard confusing versions of the shell that way? Okay, I'm sure more of you have, because people are very sloppy about their shells and are not very good at even remembering to read an internal link, so it is often quite difficult to figure out which way they think the dissent goes. You should always try to make sure that you understand the scenario that they're arguing before you start to answer it in the 2AC. Number 2, the uniqueness. Like the dissent's name, we want to argue that Obama is good, he's doing good, he's okay. Examples, A, examples, he is popular, he has political capital, he can pass his agenda. His opponents, typically the Republicans, are divided. And then perhaps most importantly, he can pass the specific agenda item that we impact. He can pass X. Okay. B, it is wise to try to have impact-specific uniqueness. Okay, this is sometimes called issue-specific uniqueness. I think that's a misnomer. I think it's better to call it impact-specific uniqueness because it is about the impact that you are reading. Okay, issue-specific could be about the link. It could be a variety of things. So I think the better way to think of it is that it is impact-specific uniqueness, specific to the impact. For example, if you were arguing Obama pushing comprehensive immigration reform is good, you should find uniqueness that says comprehensive immigration reform will pass now. Okay. That is, that Congress will support passage of comprehensive immigration reform. The reason that impact-specific uniqueness is wise is because you can use it to insulate you from generic affirmative uniqueness evidence. Okay, they may read cards that Obama is unpopular, but your evidence says he is still popular enough to win comprehensive immigration reform. Okay? Or they may read evidence that says Obama has spent a bunch of political capital. Okay? But if your evidence is recent, you can say that may be true, but he still has enough to get comprehensive immigration reform. Number 3, fiat. A, you want to argue that there is a debate about the plan. You want to be able to say that a debate happens in Congress. Okay, this shouldn't be too hard to prove, since the plan would typically require a significant increase in spending or a massive change to our current foreign policy, either of which typically trigger a debate. Okay, and you want to argue that that debate that gets triggered is divisive, even if the plan passes in the end. Okay, obviously fiat means that the plan does pass. Okay, but in the process of enacting the plan, it can still be divisive and trigger a massive debate. If it is divisive, Obama will have to exhaust political capital or energy in order to win votes, meaning that he has fewer resources and more enemies that he has to negotiate with in order to win other agenda items. Letter B, the least amount of fiat. This is sort of an interpretation you want to be able to advance. You want to say that the affirmative gets the least amount of fiat necessary to persuade just enough people to pass the plan. Okay? The AF already gets the magical power, right, to say that something that isn't going to be done gets done. Should they also get to fiat over the process by which it gets done? Is it fair for them to say that there is a 100-0 vote in favor of the plan in the Senate? No, that's a little bit extreme, right? Okay, you'd never be able to win a politics dissent if that was a legitimate interpretation. So instead, you want to say they get the least amount of fiat necessary to pass the plan. In the Senate, what would that vote count look like?
All Democrats, 2 Republicans.
Okay, all Democrats and a few Republicans, but more specifically, what number is the least amount necessary? 51. Okay, you would need 51 votes in the Senate to make something pass. Okay, so your interpretation would be that the plan would pass with 51 votes in the Senate. Okay, you should argue that this is a reasonable limit, as they get to fiat the outcome, but they should not get to fiat the process. Okay, the process is important to negative ground. They've already taken away the potential negative ground of arguing that it wouldn't actually pass. Right, they get to fiat the outcome, so the neg should be entitled to the process. Okay, number 4, the blame. Who gets the blame when an unpopular policy passes? President. Why does the president get that blame? He's supposed to be the mediator. Okay, the way Bush described himself during his presidency was, I'm the decider. Okay, the decider. So mediator's one way of looking at it. I think decider sounds a little more aggressive. So to begin with, A, he's the decider. Okay, the president signs the bill and has the final word to stop it with the veto power. If he doesn't veto it and he signs it, he becomes the one that people can point fingers at, okay, because he could have stopped it and he chose not to. Okay, and most of our foreign policy is determined by executive agencies. Okay, the State Department, Commerce, the U.S. Trade Representative, the Department of Homeland Security, the Department of Defense, the Immigration and Customs Enforcement, aka ICE. They are all executive agencies who would most likely be involved in enacting the plan. So it's relatively easy to assign blame to the branch that you hold accountable as the decider. B, the president is the focal point of American politics. First, the president is one of only 2 people who are elected nationally, nationwide. Okay, the president and the vice president. Right? We certainly don't think the vice president's to blame because the president's vice president's boss. Second, public awareness. Okay, how many of you, when you walked in this morning, knew Obama was president? Okay, good. Almost all of you. A few slow hands there. Okay, most of you though didn't know who your senators or your representatives were. Okay, but everyone knows the politician that we all elect. Okay, many of you would have a hard time blaming your senator for the plan passing because you don't know who your senator is. Okay, it is a lot easier to blame the person we all know was elected. Okay, so it's much easier due to public awareness. Third, the media. Okay, when a bill becomes a law, who do we see in the media coverage? What's the image we typically see when a bill becomes a law? President signing it, okay? You've all seen that awkward photo with all those people standing right behind him at the Oval Office with the desk, and they're all waiting to grab the souvenir pen when he's done. That's why he like signs, you know, with a bunch of different pens so everybody can have a souvenir. That's typically the image the media gives us when they tell something has become a law. Okay? Occasionally they'll show the vote count, occasionally they'll show some of the people in Congress saying aye or nay, but most of the time the image that you see is the president signing it into law. So that's the way the media has told us laws happen. And fourth, the president is the leader of his parties. Okay, the president is considered the standard bearer for the Democratic Party. Okay, if the Democrats are involved in passing the plan, then he is obviously associated with them. And in most circumstances, the Democrats would have to be involved in passing the plan. Okay, in the Senate, the Democrats represent the majority, so they would have to vote for it. Okay. Number 5, links. Okay, as I said earlier, the plan is unpopular with someone. Okay? The first group, A, politicians. Okay, and the first most important question to ask yourself when deciding to run a politics dissent, or even when you're answering a politics dissent, is how would politicians react to the plan? Okay, that's the most important question to ask yourself. Who would support it? Why would they support it? Why would they react poorly to the plan? Okay. Politicians are often the ones who drive the media coverage. They're the ones who come out and speak about it. They're the ones who stand on the steps of Capitol Hill and say this is terrible, or this is awesome, or this is a huge victory. Okay? They influence the spin and media coverage of the policy. Number 2, Congress. So within Congress, there are a number of groups that are relevant, or subgroups. A, the Democrats and their leaders. Okay, we've already mentioned earlier when we were listing off who a bunch of the prominent Democrats were. There's Senator Harry Reid, the Senate Majority Leader. There's Representative Pelosi, who's the House Minority Leader. Okay, you also want to know the chairs of relevant Senate committees. Okay, because there are particular, like the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, knowing the relevant members of that and which Democrats have influence there. Okay, the Democrats are in the majority in the Senate, so they control the chairs of the committees, but they are the minority in the House. Okay, so they are called the ranking members. Their top member, most prestigious member, is called the ranking member in the House. Okay, with the Republicans, that's flipped. Okay, letter B, the GOP and their leaders. Senator Mitch McConnell is the Senate Minority Leader, and because the Republicans are the minority in the Senate, knowing who the ranking members of their committees are is useful information. And Representative Boehner is the Speaker of the House, and knowing the chairs, because they're in the majority, of the relevant House committees. Okay, there are a variety of committees that will think they have jurisdiction over the plan. Okay, Foreign Relations Committee, the Judiciary could decide they have some influence if you were giving anti-corruption or legal or judicial assistance to Mexico, for instance. Okay, so a variety of committees. Potentially immigration is covered by a completely different committee. So various committees and who is in charge of them or who has clout in them can be relevant. Letter C, the Senate or the House. Okay, knowing what the plan, who reacts to the plan certain ways in the Senate especially, could be particularly helpful. Okay, we did mention the filibuster before. Who knows what a filibuster is?
It's when somebody talks consistently for an extremely long period of time in order to prevent a passing or a vote on a bill or whatever.
Exactly. Okay. Some of you may have seen last week that in Texas, in their Senate, there was a filibuster that turned out to be successful. Typically, there's a certain amount of time and there are deadlines by which votes have to be held. Okay, so technically a senator could filibuster and speak at length in order to prevent something from passing. However, if you were to get enough of a vote, okay, 60 votes, that was the cloture vote we talked about before, the only way to end a filibuster is to get 60 votes to end it. Yeah.
What kind of stuff do they talk about in filibusters? Do they just say like?
Well, okay, the rules vary. Our Senate does have a germaneness test. There is an expectation that when you filibuster, you will talk about something germane to the bill, which became an issue in the Texas filibuster, for instance. when she was accused of having talked about, at one point she had talked about sonograms, and she was told that was not germane to the abortion issue, which obviously a number of people disputed. So you're not supposed to get up there and read the Domino's menu. Okay, you're not supposed to get up there and talk about a whole bunch of other random stuff. You're supposed to talk about something that is germane. Okay. However, we know from tea debates, right, that lots of things can end up being germane. Okay. There are apps that don't have anything to do with the topic, and yet they manage to construct some explanation of why they might be relevant to your topic. I would imagine some senators might be able to do that. So, on a high-profile issue, the president may need a filibuster-proof majority, i.e. 60 solid votes. So if the plan alienates any of those likely 60 votes, then it could derail the agenda item. Okay, the House does not have a filibuster, but getting the 218 votes there is like herding cats. So there's probably a pretty analogous link to just trying to win a simple majority in the House. Number 3, political leaders and coalitions. There are various groups or subgroups of politicians, some who are not even in elected office, who could potentially influence public perceptions or other politicians' perceptions of particular plans. Okay, examples are former President Clinton, former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, Mitt Romney had some say during the campaign season. Rand Paul from Kentucky has a little more influence than the average newbie senator that he is. Former Alaska Governor Palin likes to talk a lot. Representative Paul Ryan, Republican from Wisconsin, who was on the Republican ticket. Representative Michelle Bachmann from Minnesota, some of you may have heard from her. She's very vocal, though she'll be leaving at the end of her term. But there are also other groups of voters, like moderate swing votes in the Senate. For instance, Angus King, the independent I told you about, occasionally will vote with Republicans. The same thing is true for some other Democrats like Hagan from North Carolina and Landrieu from Louisiana. Similarly, Senator Collins, who is a Republican from Maine, sometimes votes with the Democrats. And then there are other little subgroups like Tea Partiers, Libertarians, Social Conservatives, Independents, who can have various influence. Big letter B, the public, or medium letter B, whatever we're working with here. The public, they are the voters to which politicians are accountable. Okay. For example, a massive new tax to fund foreign aid policies may be catastrophically unpopular with many voters. Okay. People don't like paying taxes to begin with, and when they figure out that their tax dollars are going to Venezuela, they may not be as happy. Letter C, interest groups or coalitions. We've already hinted at this a little. The plan could be unpopular with liberals, moderates, social conservatives, energy lobbies, unions, immigration lobbies, fiscal conservatives, libertarians, environmentalists, the oil lobby, big business, the military. Basically, any group that you can think of that has a particular interest in politics could have an opinion about the plan. Letter D, the media. How does the media cover politics?
Like you said, the politicians tend to lead the media in how certain things should be discussed.
Okay, so politicians influence the media coverage to a certain extent. Okay, the other thing that sometimes, how did the media cover the campaign? Okay, what was kind of a prominent theme during the presidential election campaign? What did the media frame it as? What kind of competition was it? Oh, well, okay, the issue was the economy. What I'm looking for here is, though, have you heard the phrase horse race? Okay, oftentimes, especially during election season, you always hear who's up in the polls, who's ahead right now. Oh, did that hurt him in the polls? Did Romney do this wrong? Is that going to affect him in the polls? Did Obama do this right and that'll affect him in the polls? Okay, the media covers things in a dramatic fashion. Okay, news viewership is not the most exciting thing. You know, watching the news is not always the most exciting thing. And so the media tends to try to make things more dramatic. Okay, and part of how they do that is by using the frame of winners and losers, okay, which even takes the extreme when they describe the race as a horse race. Okay, every policy creates winners and losers. The media looks for stories with heroes and villains. Okay, drama. And policies get viewed through that economic lens that I told you about. which helps contribute to the winners and losers. Because if somebody gets an economic gain from the plan, somebody else is going to be the economic loser as a result of the plan. Okay? And so they often will try to frame things as what policies helped, that policy helped the people of Venezuela, but what did it do for the people in Peoria, Illinois? Nothing. Okay, so they will often try to frame things as winners and losers. Another way to think of it, though, how many of you occasionally watch The Daily Show or Stephen Colbert? Okay, another way, or sometimes SNL, Saturday Night Live, will have good political sketches. Another way to think about the plan is how would the fake media spin it? Okay, the fake media loves to make fun of policies. Okay, and so coming up with what the Saturday Night Live opening sketch would look like as a result of the plan is another way to think about it, or how Colbert would make fun of Obama's, giving in on Cuba. So thinking about ways that, especially because Colbert is supposed to represent sort of Republican, it's a satire obviously, but it's supposed to represent sort of how stereotypical Republicans might react, okay? And so looking at how they would react on the Colbert Show and kind of asking yourself, what would Colbert do, how would it get framed, is potentially useful. Okay, The Daily Show can also be critical of Obama. When Obama flip-flops on something, they have a field day, okay? So, making sure that you think about how the news or the fake news may spin the plan can influence how the public and political perceptions would play out. Number 6, internal links. A, political capital. First, policymaking. Policymaking is a process of negotiating among a variety of interests in order to win support for your policy. Policymaking is a process of negotiating among a variety of interests in order to win support for your policy. This may mean trading favors, making promises, twisting arms, exerting authority, bargaining, compromising, sacrificing. Political capital can best be described as the political resources a president has in negotiating with other politicians. Okay, and we'll talk a little bit about those resources now. 2, the more tangible resources, the ones that are a little more measurable. These resources include things such as staff, media attention, time, energy. Okay, these are somewhat measurable. The president can measure how much time he is spending on an issue, or how much staff is devoted to cover an issue, or how much media attention an issue gets. Okay, number 3 is the less tangible resources. Okay, the less tangible resources are things like leadership, goodwill, whether or not a politician hates Obama, likes Obama, or likes Obama, whether or not they're Facebook friends, goodwill, whether or not they, you don't have goodwill for the people you're not friends with, so goodwill, and then credibility. Okay, so the less tangible ones are leadership, goodwill, and credibility. Number 4, the impact of political capital. If the plan sparks an intense and heated debate, the president is likely to exhaust both the tangible and intangible political resources that he has to negotiate with. Okay? He and his staff will invest time and energy in trying to get it passed, but they will also probably bruise egos and burn some bridges in the process. Number 5, there's always a risk of a link. Remember, ultimately, the plan does pass. Okay, right? The AF does get to do their plan. We'll allow that. Okay, but in the process, the opponents of the plan lose. Okay, remember we talked about winners and losers just a moment ago? The plan passes, but somebody ends up mad. Okay, they're bitter when Obama foils them again. That damn Obama, he got us. Okay, as a result, Obama is exhausted, has used up a bunch of resources, and half the people he needs to negotiate with to get his other agenda item, your impact, passed, are mad at him. Okay? That's not a great negotiating environment. It has poisoned the well for future negotiations. Okay? Plans that the Congress doesn't like poison the negotiating environment, and they tap out the resources needed by the president to function in that environment. Right, letter B, popularity. If the president has the public behind him, Congress is less likely to fight his agenda because he is perceived to have the support of their constituents, the people, behind him. Also, if his popularity is high, the media is much kinder to his agenda. However, when popularity declines, Congress has less incentive to make deals with him, as they have nothing to gain from cooperating with an unpopular president. Okay, for example, during the 90s, President Clinton was impeached. Okay, when the Oval Office sex scandal broke, everyone was shocked and appalled. You can't do that in the White House, that's not okay. Even Democrats were very critical of him. However, after a little bit of time passed, polls started to show that the public thought that focusing on a White House sex scandal was not a good use of their time and energy, and that politicians should have been focusing on trying to get the government, the budget operating efficiently. Okay, there had been a government shutdown, okay, that we needed to make sure that we were focusing on real issues. The public didn't care what Clinton had done, okay? So basically when it became apparent that the public was supporting him, Democrats returned to supporting him. Okay, so even on the day he was impeached, okay, he held what looked like a victory party in the Rose Garden at the White House with all of the Democrats standing beside him. And in spite of the fact that he had in fact been impeached, he went on in the next midterm election to raise that more seats were gained by Democrats than in recent history during a midterm election, and that was relatively rare at the time. The president in power usually lost seats during a midterm election. And so the reality was that the public was backlashing against Republicans, and it hurt the Republicans as a result. The public was more on the president's side, so popularity helped him in terms of gaining those seats that year. Number 7, the impacts. Like the name of the dissent, Obama's agenda is good. Okay? A, these are typically items on the legislative agenda and they change from round to round. B, they assume that Obama's stance or policy on the issue is good. Okay, so sometimes it may not be something that Obama wants to pass. It may be something that Obama is trying to stop Republicans from doing. Okay, for instance, the Republicans, at the drop of a hat, the House Republicans hold votes to repeal Obama's health care plan. Okay, so it may be that Obama needs to be strong in order to prevent the Republicans from repealing his health care plan, because his health care plan is good and their version of no health care or a different health care plan would be bad. Some examples. One round you might debate that Obama's health care policy is good. Another round you might debate that his Russia policy is good. Another round you could debate that his comprehensive immigration reform policies are good. Or that the law of the sea treaty that he's pushing is good. Or that trade promotion authority is good. All right, big letter D, Obama bad. And this one will go quicker than the Obama good version went because a lot of it is just the flip side of what we said about Obama good. First, the shell. A, Obama wants to pass X agenda item now, but can't quite get it. Okay? You want to be able to say that he wants something, but is not going to successfully get it yet. B, the plan makes him politically or publicly popular, or it gives him a legislative victory. C, popularity or legislative victory is key to his agenda. And then D, X agenda item is bad. Number 2, the uniqueness. Like the name of the dissent, we want to say Obama is doing bad now, or not quite good.
We're just looking for 2 kids to make sure they're in here. Leo Kim and Rena Daisy.
Here.
Okay, cool.
What's up?
Nope, that's all. You all just didn't check out of Welch this morning, so just making sure you're here.
I did.
Sorry, you.
That's okay. All right, mystery solved. Okay, we want to say that Obama's doing bad now. Not bad like terrible and sucks or anything like that, but more that he can't quite get what he wants now. So some examples. He can't quite win his agenda. The Democrats are divided or the Republicans are united to stop him from getting what he wants right now. B, again, you want to have impact-specific uniqueness. Okay, evidence that he is pushing X or wants X, implying that he doesn't quite control the policy on that issue now. Okay, so if you were going to say Obama's trade promotion authority is bad, then you could argue that he can't quite win trade promotion authority now. Okay. However, be careful, letter C, don't let uniqueness overwhelm your link. Don't let uniqueness overwhelm your link. Okay, you don't want to say that Trade Promotion Authority won't pass now because of Obama's environmental policies. Okay, because the plan probably doesn't change or resolve whatever is unpopular about those environmental policies, right? Okay, lifting the embargo on Cuba is not going to change that he isn't getting it because of environmental policies. Okay, so you want to make sure there is a reason that Trade Promotion Authority won't pass, but it isn't a reason that the plan can't overcome. Okay, so you want to say that he just doesn't quite have enough votes for it yet, but as a result of a legislative victory, he would have the votes necessary in order to get his agenda, and that would be bad. All right, number 3, the fiat and credit arguments. A, the blame warrants, the reasons why we describe the president gets the blame, all apply here as well. Okay, so that's the same from the Obama good version of the dissent, section 4A and B, all of the reasons he's the decider, etc. Letter B, the easy story. If the plan is something he's pushed, okay, like Obama has said since before he was elected that he wants to close Guantanamo. Okay, so an easy link argument is when he finally gets Guantanamo closed, it is a victory for him. Okay? Remember also that his executive agencies typically would have to do the plan, so that anything that he pushes or that is associated with the executive branch, he is more likely to get credit for. Letter C, victory. Okay, you can still argue a debate about the plan happens, okay? But Obama does win that debate, right? Because the plan passes. So even if the plan is potentially unpopular or controversial, fiat ensures that he emerges victorious. Okay? Since the plan passes, there is only a risk of a link. It ultimately looks like a win. Letter D, fiat. Okay, earlier we said that fiat is the least amount of persuasion necessary to do the plan, right? Well, that was an interpretation for the other version of the dissent. But if you wanted to have a similar interpretation here, you could say that he would get the credit because of the way the tie gets broken in the Senate. Do you remember how the tie gets broken in the Senate?
Biden.
The vice president. So when the vice president swoops in to save the day and break the tie, the Obama administration gets the credit, okay, for this arduous fight, and he emerges victorious when Biden swoops in and casts the tie-breaking vote. Letter E, the link outweighs the turn. Again, even if the plan is controversial, the fact that it passes ensures a victory link because the plan does win. Okay, number 4, the links. This is essentially the same as above, right, in the Obama good section, except that the plan makes him popular or helps him win a victory. Okay, so again, just reverse politicians like the plan, that gives him a victory. The public likes the plan, the media likes the plan, various groups of politicians like the plan. Reverse those, and those are your links to this version of the dissent. Number 5, the internal links. A, legislative victory. First, this is how a president earns political capital. Okay, even if the debate happens, even if the plan is controversial, he emerges victorious, helping contribute to more victories. Second, when a president wins one victory, it can result in a series of victories because politicians want to be on the winning team. Okay, they don't want to seem obstructionist. And so there's a famous piece of evidence by Norman Ornstein that put it this way: winning comes to those who look like winners. Okay, so people want to join the winning side, and once you win one victory, it can spiral to additional victories. Third, an example of this was in the summer of 2001. Bush had a string of victories in which he won his version of the energy bill, his version of the farm bill, and even his version of a patient's rights bill, which was a health care issue that typically Democrats owned Republicans on. And then a couple of winters ago, Obama had a similar string of victories in which he won a bunch of things in a row, including START ratification, lifting Don't Ask, Don't Tell, and his compromise on tax cuts. Fourth, you want to think about how spin is relevant. Okay, politicians spin policies in their favor. Okay, so if you're trying to run an Obama bad dissent, you should think about how Obama would spin the plan in order to look like a win. Put yourself in his shoes. If you were the politician trying to pass this app, how would you describe it as a victory? What are the things that are good about the policy? Think about ways that you can use that to frame how people would view the policy. Letter B, olive branch or concessions. Does anybody know what an olive branch is? It's a peace offering, okay? It's typically something that the metaphor is you extend an olive branch to the other side, to your opponents, to try to get them on board with you. It's usually a signal of an attempt to compromise, okay? During his campaign for the presidency, Obama often spoke of his intentions to be a president to bring hope and change to politics, including in his dealings with Congress. Okay, whether or not that's panned out, that's still open to debate. However, there are often people who say that whenever there are tensions between the two branches, it would be well advised for the president to extend an olive branch on something they like. Okay, so doing a policy, then theoretically a policy that Republicans like, in order to get them to go along with him on other parts of his agenda. Okay, so you can find evidence that says an olive branch or concessions by the plan, by Obama, with regard to the plan, can get people on board with other people, get the Republicans on board to vote for his agenda. Obviously, the olive branch makes most sense in a circumstance where you need Republicans to get Obama's agenda. Okay, he shouldn't, we're in a sad state of affairs if he has to offer an olive branch to his own party in order to get his agenda. Okay, so it's typically the Republicans. Letter C, popularity. Okay, we went through this before. Popularity with the public means Congress is more likely to go along with the president's agenda. So the popularity internal link is virtually the same as with the version of the Obama good dissent. Number 6, the impacts. Again, like the name of the dissent, Obama's agenda is bad. A, again, these are typically items on the legislative agenda. They will change from round to round. B, they assume Obama's stance or policy on the issue is bad. C, examples. One round, you might debate that the Republicans are going to repeal his health care policy, and we should let that happen because his health care policy is bad. Another round, you could debate that the Trans-Pacific Partnership trade agreement that Obama is pushing is bad, or that comprehensive immigration reform is bad, or his environmental regulations and climate policies are bad because they will hurt businesses. Right, big letter E, general neg tips. First, uniqueness. A, control the uniqueness. Okay, everybody gets all caught up in what does it mean to control the uniqueness and control the link? Okay, it just means win. Okay, win your uniqueness. This is not like some mystical language. Okay, win your uniqueness, control your uniqueness. As long as you win your uniqueness, they can't have a unique link term. Okay. For example, if you are running Obama good and you're claiming that comprehensive immigration reform is good as your impact, your uniqueness claim is that Obama will win his version of comprehensive immigration reform now. Okay? If you win that he can win his CIR now, then even if their plan is popular, they can't have a link term. What are they going to do? Make it pass more? Right? It's comprehensive immigration reform is already going to pass. If you win it is going to pass, then even if they win that it might be popular with some people, they don't get a unique link term because they can't make it pass more than there's no impact to it passing more, even if it did pass more. Okay, even if it got more votes than it would have now, there's no impact to that. Okay. Letter B, don't make your dissent brinkish. Okay, does anybody know what a brink argument is? Anybody have any examples of one in relation to a politics dissent?
Like how much political capital is used, and if you like go over that amount, then something can pass. But if you go right under it, then like it can pass. And it's like, where is that like number of political capital?
The problem is when you make your dissent brinkish, when you say he has just enough political capital. Okay, well if he trips on the stairs the next morning and the media covers it, that could cost him the political capital in order to win your uniqueness. You'd be in trouble. Okay, another example is when people say, oh, comprehensive immigration reform has a 50-50 shot of passing right now. What's the problem with that? Well, 49-51. But when you say 50-50, okay, that means that you have agreed that there's a 50% chance your dissent does not happen. Okay? Okay, you have made it too brinkish. 50-50 is too close. Okay, I would say, optimally, you want to go towards 70-30. If you have to say percentages, I wouldn't really talk about percentages, but certainly don't say there's a 50-50 shot, okay? Because when you do, that makes it just more likely that they will say, oh, a 50-50 shot, then they could win. It also means they could win a link term, Okay? Because if there's a 50% chance it won't pass, and the plan makes, if there's some uncertainty, if it's that close, 50-50, then the plan, if it's popular, could actually help, right? The plan could make it more likely that it passes, and they could win a unique link term. Number 2, the links. This is where you kind of come up with link arguments. A, the past. Okay, if the plan has come up for debate before and failed, it is useful to explore that past for politics links. Why haven't we lifted the embargo in the 50 years? Have we never debated it? I'm pretty sure we have. Okay, so pointing to examples of what has happened when we've had votes on it before. Okay, why didn't it pass? Is the political climate still analogous? Has the program been cut before? Okay, we've cut various drug interdiction policies. Okay, maybe that's because they weren't working, which means that there will usually be political opinions that politicians have about them. Okay, you can especially look in the Act's inherency and solvency evidence, because oftentimes it will describe why the policy hasn't passed, or examples of where they've tried but haven't executed the policies before. Letter B, the plan. First, mechanisms. Okay, the State Department versus private actors, civil versus military actors, whether it's new spending versus taxation, whether it's a free market style policy or a regulatory policy. Various components of the mechanism of the plan can influence whether or not the plan is popular or not. Second, the agent of the plan. The USAID, the Department of Homeland Security, the Department of Defense, the EPA, all of which, any of whom can have potential political baggage associated with them. If a particular agency's budget has been cut, turning around and trying to use that same agency to do the plan may draw more attention to it or notice and have people backlash. Third, the funding for the plan. Okay, spending money can be extremely unpopular. By contrast, doing the plan through tax incentives to get businesses to work with the Venezuelan oil industry may be more popular. Everybody loves a tax break. Number 4, the philosophy of the plan. Okay, like I just said, a plan that gives tax incentives will be more popular with Republicans who think that tax incentives help businesses and spur innovation. Meanwhile, it will be less popular with Democrats who think that those types of tax breaks are just a crutch for the wealthy that enables them to hurt the little guy. And number 5, the image of the plan. Okay, remember I told you before to put yourself in the politician's shoes. What image is there of the plan? Okay, or what image, basically try to imagine what the media would do with the plan, for instance. Okay, a politician can look good by helping reduce infant mortality in Mexico. No politician wants to go on record as fighting the plan that saves babies. Okay, so that might be a circumstance where you can argue a political win or victory, winner's win style link, that the plan that makes everybody rallies around the plan because they don't want to be the one who votes against the plan that saves babies. Letter C, the 1AC. Okay, affirmatives are not as careful as they should be about making sure they don't put links into their 1AC. Okay, first, the harm area. Okay, bolstering Mexican agriculture, for instance, could spark controversy because it would, if the plan claims a Mexican agriculture advantage, okay, that would probably boost Mexico's agriculture industry, but at whose expense? Ours. Okay, our farmers have gone through some tough times in recent years, and things that are perceived as propping up their industry would be perceived as hurting ours potentially. Okay, other things in the harm area, sometimes harm areas admit that there would be backlash against the plan. Oftentimes, like the Cuba app will probably have to admit at some point it would be hard to construct a 1AC without some of the best cards, because some of them do say that there's little political will to change the embargo policy. Second, inherency evidence. Okay, inherency barriers are often political in nature. Okay, old school structural and attitudinal inherency, attitudes against the plan, structural barriers like current policies or laws that prevent the plan from happening. Okay, those are usually for political reasons. Third, the solvency evidence. Solvency evidence will often admit that our plan will be well received politically, or, while the plan has been subject to much debate, we think it would be good for the following reasons. Okay, well, that subject to much debate demonstrates your Obama good link. or the argument that it will be politically well received demonstrates your Obama badly. Okay? So you can look for those things in their solvency cards. Third, suggestions regarding impacts. And these apply for all the different types of impacts. A, short-term, okay? Short-term internal link scenarios, short-term impacts are probably better because they will give you edges over apps that take a long time to solve their advantage. Okay? It is better if you can find an impact that says that there is an immediate reaction to the passage or failure of an agenda item. Okay? Economic agenda items are great for that. Okay? If we don't pass a debt ceiling hike this fall, markets will react immediately, and there will be potential economic fallout immediately. Okay? B, domestic versus international impacts. Typically, international scenarios have a better chance of outweighing the app, because the app will be able to claim some IR advantages and stuff like that. Okay? But theoretically, some domestic ones could, like economic or sequester or debt ceiling, are often thought to be a more domestic internal U.S. policy, but they can have larger international ramifications if they affect the economy. But generally speaking, you should keep your eye on making sure that your impact is international in nature, even if the agenda item isn't. C, try to use the impact to access the case, either that the case doesn't solve or that it actually turns the case. For example, an economic decline would turn an economy or competitiveness advantage. Okay, it could actually make the situation worse. Okay, or at minimum, it might mean that we don't have the resources to continue to do diplomacy and other types of engagement abroad. All right, number 4, which one do I run? Okay, this is probably one of the most frequent questions I get asked by folks who want my advice on politics. So which one do I run? Which scenario is the best? Okay, I can't answer that question for you. You need to ask yourself a series of questions in order to determine which scenario is best for you. Okay? And ultimately, it's the one that you can tell the best story on. Okay? You need to be able to construct an explanation of what happens when the plan passes that causes the disadvantage. So you need to ask yourself the following questions. A, is the plan popular or unpopular? Okay? To begin with, that decides the direction of the link, right? B, with whom is the plan popular or unpopular? Okay? Is it powerful politicians, or is it just unpopular with people that nobody listens to? Okay? If it's unpopular with a very small group, that may not be enough to trigger your link. Okay? C, how would it be spun by politicians, interest groups, or the media? Okay, how do those groups all react to the plan? D, who would get the credit or blame? Okay, it is more difficult to explain why Obama would get the blame for the plan if he has said he wouldn't touch it with a 10-foot pole. Okay? Obama distances himself from things. Politicians do this all the time. If they perceive something to be unpopular, they'll be like, I will never do that. Okay? You could still argue, though, that theoretically Obama could get the blame for something like that because, like we said earlier, he's the decider. If he really disliked the plan so much, he could have vetoed it, right? And by virtue of the plan passing, eventually he has to put his signature on it, okay? Even if it's through a veto override. But the point being, so you could still construct, but if you have a hard time trying to explain how Obama could get pinned with the plan, then you may want to consider a different variation of the dissent, okay? Letter E, how would the news react? Okay, one way to think about it is what would the New York Times headline read? Or what would the big box at the bottom of the Fox News screen say? Okay, you know, cozying up to Venezuela or cozying up to Cuba probably will only confirm some of Fox News' fears about Obama. Okay, they'll ask if Kenya's next, for instance. So asking yourselves how those media agencies would react. And then lastly, as I said, or not lastly, letter F, what would Jon Stewart or Colbert or SNL do? What would the fake news do with the plan? How would they react to it? And then letter G, or whatever letter I'm up to, which version of your dissad is stronger at the moment? Okay? If you do not have a single card that says that comprehensive immigration reform is going to pass, then that may not be your strongest version of the DA. Okay? Some of you may recall from the December, January period, does anybody remember what issue was like the prime focus of politics at the time?
Fiscal cliff.
Yeah, the fiscal cliff, okay? So we traveled out to California for our swing tournaments during Christmas break. And basically, our tournament started on January 2nd, okay? The whole fiscal cliff thing, that was it. That was all the news all the time. That was everything that was getting covered. And so we expected that people would be reading sequester and fiscal cliff impacts and things like that, which some folks were. But in the midst of this huge debate, where wall-to-wall coverage of the debt hike and the sequester and the fiscal cliff, one article got written saying that Obama was going to push immigration reform and that he might have the capital to do it. Okay, but it was the card was a drop in the bucket against a sea of cards that said the only thing politicians care about right now is the fiscal cliff and stuff like that. So we were able to beat most of those. Like a bunch of teams found that card and were like, sweet, I could read something that's not the fiscal cliff. Except that it wasn't the fiscal cliff, and that was all politics cared about at the time. And so it was an uphill battle for NEGs to win that uniqueness debate, because while you may find one card on your uniqueness argument, or one article, or even a few cards, if it is contrary to political reality at the time, you will have a difficult time winning the dissent. Okay, another time that people had difficulty winning the dissent was during late October. Does anybody remember what happened the last week of October? Last fall? Hurricane Sandy. Okay, the Harvard College tournament was that weekend. We were in fact stranded at that hotel for several days later because of the hurricane, because all the flights got canceled out of Boston. And the funny thing though is that people were trying to win politics dissents and claiming the media would perceive your plan and react X, Y, or Z way to your plan. Are you kidding me? The only coverage that week was all hurricane all the time. Okay, you saw the images, the person standing out in the raincoat with their flipped backwards umbrella and their microphone, trying not to get dragged out into the sea. Do you think they cared about our plan in the midst of all that? No. Okay, so knowing what the political situation looks like, okay, which brings me to my final point and my conclusion. The only way you can know the answers to all these questions, okay, and what version of the dissent is best, is if you pay attention to the news. Okay? Whether you love the dissent or hate the dissent, in order to debate it the best you can, you need to know what's going on, okay? So paying attention to the news, following, so that you can figure out, well, hey, this dissent doesn't make any sense right now. There's a hurricane going on, okay? Seems to be a pretty useful piece of information to have, and the only way you can know that is if you actually pay attention to the news. And they don't always have all the news on Facebook. There are other sources. So broaden your horizons to look at other news sources. Questions?